Uncharted has become a widely beloved series for PlayStation fans all around the world. A franchise that went on to release 4 games and a standalone DLC spanning 2 console generations. This spelled success for Naughty Dog, a developer that used to be mostly known for Crash Bandicoot and the Jak and Daxter franchise. But what was it that made Uncharted such a success? Well, in hopes to answer that, I'm going to be breaking down each individual game in the series so that we might have a better understanding. And where better to start than at the beginning? This is Uncharted: Drake's Fortune. Naughty Dog, originally Jam Software, was acquired by Sony Computer Entertainment in 2001. Already having acclaimed releases like Crash Bandicoot under their belt, Naughty Dog would release what is regarded as one of the PlayStation 2's most notable titles, Jak and Daxter. A 3D action venture platformer that was so distinct both visually and from a gameplay perspective that it became an instant success. It, just like Crash Bandicoot, was a game for everyone. It was wacky enough for kids while challenging enough for adults. It was exactly what the PlayStation 2 needed to release alongside with. A game to help sell the console. Jak and Daxter would go on to sell 1.7 million copies by the end of the PlayStation 2's life cycle, earning Naughty Dog its rightful place as one of the most well-respected game developers in the industry. It also allowed for Naughty Dog to become solidified as one of the many faces for Sony Computer Entertainment, alongside devs like SIE Santa Monica. They would then release 2 sequels and a kart racer spin-off that would reach equal success. Enter 2002 and the release of Sony's PlayStation 3. After the completion of Jak 3, Naughty Dog were to begin development on the next project. Well aware of the upcoming generation of consoles, Naughty Dog faced a choice. Reprise Jak and Daxter for a 4th installment or bring forth a new IP. And we all know what followed suit. They went on to create a fresh new franchise that would push past the limitations of the latter consoles. Where the PS2 would confine them to a more stylized approach to their character models, the vast improvement that would be the PS3 would allow them to make a more realistic turn in design. Utilizing tools such as the PS3's RSX reality synthesizer, the 6-axis controller, and taking advantage of the newly successful Blu-ray format, Naughty Dog began production on their most ambitious project to date. Thus, the roots of Uncharted had been planted. Drawing from inspirations such as Indiana Jones and Tomb Raider, the team wanted to develop an intense action-adventure game reminiscent of these titles. The idea was simple, a character-based third-person shooter that incorporated platform mechanics their studio was known for. High action sequences that you'd see in a blockbuster cinema were a must, and to add a cherry on top, they needed intriguing characters that you could relate to beyond the means of what a 2.5-hour film could offer. And that is where Uncharted was born. After a year of small team production, with the full team coming together for the remainder of the 3-year development cycle, Uncharted: Drake's Fortune finally released in November of 2007, kicking off one of the most successful PlayStation exclusive franchises in video game history. Now that we're caught up on the history of Uncharted, let's take a look at what we're really here for: the game itself. We'll dissect the game through my usual routine: story, graphics, and gameplay. Let's see what Uncharted had to offer. This is Nathan Drake, our protagonist, a handsome, charismatic 2-bit thief with a heart of gold, portrayed by Nolan North himself. Nate believes himself to be the long-lost heir of Sir Francis Drake, an English explorer of high regard in the 16th century. This is the driving force behind most of Nate's life. He, much like his ancestor, wants to be something greater than he is. He yearns to be well respected and leave his own legacy behind as to not be forgotten. As to follow in Sir Francis's footsteps, Drake would take a very literal approach in that path, spending most of his life in search of Francis's personal belongings in hopes of uncovering the man's secrets. But life isn't easy for a man who plays by his own rules. Nate has spent years scraping by, learning the ways of the criminal underground from his mentor, Victor Sullivan, portrayed by Richard McGonigal. Nate and Sully don't seem to be able to catch a break. Between Sully's inability to pay his debts and Nate's lust for adventure and discovery, they've put themselves in a bit of a predicament. And this is where our story picks up. Nate has determined that Francis Drake faked his own death in order to bury something of great value. The coordinates to the explorer's tomb, however, led him to the middle of the ocean off the coast of Panama. With no money to fund an expedition to retrieve it, Nate contacts a television network who promises to fund them in exchange for story coverage. It's here that we're introduced to another prominent figure and love interest, Elena Fisher, portrayed by Emily Rose. After finding the tomb in Drake's lost diary, which conveniently has the treasure location within it, sort of, Sully and Nate abandon Elena on shore in order to hunt for the treasure themselves. This brings the duo to a deserted forest where they discover that El Dorado is not a location, but rather a giant golden statue. That's going to be the extent of my story summary, so let's dive deep into what makes this story actually great instead of focusing on the details of the story itself. In order to have an interesting and engaging story, you must first have interesting and engaging characters. Elena and Nate's initial relationship is all business. With differing motives, the two work together in order to fulfill their common goal: find El Dorado. What this transforms into is a bond between two people who have to lean on each other and learn to trust each other in order to survive. This is the heart of Uncharted: relationships and characters. Within the first hour of the game, you already have a simplistic understanding of these characters and their personalities. You have a simplified idea of the lives that they live, as well as their motivations. This goes back to what I always speak to people when I describe Uncharted as an action film being the main source of inspiration. In a 2-hour movie, you must quickly establish your characters and their motivations in order for your audience to feel as if they know these people. And Drake's Fortune pulls this off better than most films I've seen in years. One thing Uncharted does that so many other games don't do is giving you story throughout the gameplay as well. Characters will have conversations about the story developments amid gameplay sections, from simply checking on each other to conversing about aspiring events. It's story progression where we don't typically see any, and it works oh so well. Hell, a lot of times Nate will simply speak to himself. A high praise that I often give Naughty Dog when it comes to their storytelling is their high level of character development. While it's definitely visible in this game, we don't see peak Nathan Drake yet. I feel this might be because the team didn't know that Nate had such a big future, but by the end of the game I realized that he wasn't as fleshed out as he could have been. The same goes for all of our supporting roles. Elena, Sully, and even our antagonist Roman never feel like we really personally know them, but we do get a pretty decent understanding of who these people are, and we get to see them grow throughout the story, even if just a little bit. What they did give us, however, was believable human characters. See, Nathan Drake isn't like most video game characters. They did an amazing job at making you feel like Nate is mortal. He's vulnerable, he bleeds, cries, feels pain. He's not a superhero. Throughout the game, you can see the stress and wear that this adventure is putting on him. It makes you realize that he is indeed human, just like us. Aside from his quippy personality, you always feel that Nate is just as close to dying as we would be. By the end of the game, you realize that Nate's just been fumbling around through this whole ordeal. When we're put into rough situations in life, we have to be able to pick ourselves up and fight through. When we come out on the other side of things, we're typically better off for it, and Nate's no different. Each game shows us the faults of our protagonist, whether it be greed or ego. By the end of the game, we have to be able to tell that he's changed in some way. Naughty Dog's writers did a tremendous job on showing us this gradual change. Maybe not in this game, as subtle as the character development may be, but just in general, we get to see that Nate is a different person than what they originally give us of him. It is a pretty good portrayal into the mindset of Nathan Drake. But it's not just Nate that we see grow throughout the story. Here's 2 clips that could explain this better than I ever could.
What is it? Come on, hold it up.
No way. Deal was for a coffin. That's it.
Wait a minute. If my show hadn't have funded this expedition, you wouldn't have...
You got your story, lady.
Look, Mr. Drake, you signed a contract. I have a right to see. How does something like this happen?
See those scorch marks?
Uh-huh.
Somebody packed this place with enough gunpowder to blow it wide open. Ooh. Watch where you step. Some of these boards are really falling. Elena! I can't hold on! Give me your other hand! You've got to let it go!
Damn it! Oh, shit!
It's okay. Come on. Come on.
With all the praise I'm giving this story, none of this would be possible without any actual story for us to witness these events unfold. The majority of this game takes place on a small island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, a luscious jungle that conceals danger at every turn. Whether it be armed militia or nature, something is always out to kill Nate. So it's not just a race to El Dorado, but a fight for survival and humanity along the way. This is illustrated best in scenes like this.
That's right, you ugly kunyuk! Don't mess with Eddie Raja!
Eddie! Eddie, hold on! You have got to be kidding me. Elena, hurry up!
Without captivating scenes like this, we would never be able to get the same feeling of agency that we get. Seeing Nate try his damnedest to save one of his lifelong adversaries tells us a great deal about how he perceives his situation and gives us a little more depth to our character. Hell, I even felt bad for Eddie at this time. The combination of these tidbits of history that we receive here and our strong character-driven scenes like this really gave us a strong introduction to the franchise and these now beloved characters. But I've spent way too much time babbling about the plot here, so how about we talk about those 2007 graphics? I don't have any recorded footage of what this game looked like in 2007, but I will say this. In 2007, this damn game was visually stunning. High graphical fidelity was a key factor to selling games at the launch of this generation of consoles. Consumers wanted to see just how amazing and impressive the new technology would be, and Naughty Dog pretty much delivered. The PS3's RSX reality synthesizer was one of the key components they would utilize. This processing unit would allow them to portray detailed graphics in areas where they were limited just a generation ago. It expanded on the usage of lighting models while introducing aspects such as real-time shadowing and more dynamic water effects. Being new technology, they really had to learn how to use it pretty quickly. They did have deadlines after all. Another technique new to Naughty Dog was motion capture, used for creating more fluid and lifelike cutscene animations. If you're unfamiliar with the process, motion capture consists of actors performing their scenes in a large studio area in mocap suits. These suits have tiny balls attached to them that the cameras would track in order to transfer the captured footage into the correlating game. Naughty Dog would also record their dialogue and vocal sessions during the mocap sequences, meaning if any mistakes were made, they'd have to start from the top of the scene. They would go a step further than traditional mocap usage, however, and integrate use into gameplay as well, recording running animations, jump animations, etc. This would all culminate to make Nathan and other characters continuously lifelike through all aspects of the game, not just the cutscenes. The world of Drake's Fortune is scenic and beautiful. A lot of love and effort went into building this island and forest we inhabit during the game. As I previously stated, I unfortunately don't have any footage from 2007's version of this game. I'm speaking strictly out of memory and nostalgia. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this section, so let's hop on over to what makes this game a game in the first place. Gameplay. Uncharted consists of two separate but equal gameplay points that I'll be discussing here, similar to my Fallen Order review. First off, let's talk about traversal and platforming. Naughty Dog is famous for their platforming mechanics in their early console generation releases. Crash and Jack both were highly focused on platforming puzzles, so it made sense to implement the same formula into their treasure hunting adventure. Given that this is a more reality-grounded series, the team would have to tweak their original formula in order to make platforming more human-like and realistic. This means giving Nate realistically climbable objects and traversable areas while still making us feel like what we're doing is a feat of fucking badassery. Navigating the island is ridiculously fun. Scaling the side of an old fort can fill you with anxiety as your handholds start to crumble underneath you. Ancient structures fall apart as you jump on top of them, forcing you to clear them faster and think on your feet. Mountains and cliffside ventures give you a stunning view of the island or port as you make your way through the island. Later locations can be dark and menacing as you narrowly escape terrors in the dark. While Nate is still human, Nate can easily run, jump, and climb up most obstacles with ease. One traversal aspect that has me thrown off is Nathan's ability to jump at inconsistent lengths. Sometimes he struggles to make a 5-foot jump, while later on he easily clears a 15-foot gap. I don't think it's intentional, but rather just a level design limitation. Or perhaps them trying to go for realism when he's not leaping for anything. There's no telling. Nate can sometimes have trouble detecting ledges he's supposed to grab onto, and this can cause some frustration. This is most evident towards the end of the game. Here's an example. I'm not bashing on the game, not at all. Uncharted goes to become one of the smoothest platforming series available. There was just a few issues in the first title. Pushing past the couple of issues that these mechanics encountered, it's a very solid platforming gameplay, and in my opinion, it's only matched by the Assassin's Creed franchise. Traversal is also very important for the puzzle sequences, most of which require you to climb and jump around to activate switches and so forth. Speaking of puzzles, they're actually few and far between in this game. Weird considering this is an Indiana Jones love letter. When they do occur, they're just strenuous enough to make you use big brain. Uncharted features third-person shooter combat that was completely new to Naughty Dog. Although it was new to them, it really didn't do anything new here. You have your basic cover shooter mechanics with limited ammo and bullet sponge enemies. Take cover, you can blind fire or pop from cover for more accurate aiming. Enemies drop decent amounts of ammo, but not enough to compensate for the ungodly amounts of AK bullets you'll pour into them. You can compensate for this, however, with melee combat. When going hand to hand with combatants, you can pull a brutal combo to yield you double the ammo dropped. One cool feature that Uncharted presents that these similar titles don't is incorporating the combat into traversal. As Nate, you can climb around to a ledge to gain an advantage and use that for cover while raining down hell with your run-of-the-mill pistol. Also grenades. Let's talk about grenades. You won't see it here, but in 2007's version of the game, in an attempt to utilize the 6-axis controller, the fucking grenade control was motion control, and it was the most god-awful thing in the entire fucking world. Thankfully, by the time Uncharted 2 released, the 6-axis was a failure and they gave up on this mechanic indefinitely. While the combat was not all that impressive, I will say that it was very solid for what it was, and they would continue to perfect it throughout the years. While traversal was more impressive than combat, most of these systems did work well together, and they worked actually better together than separately. Once again, I'd like to make it known that I'm not shitting on this game. I absolutely love this game. I believe that the flaws in combat and traversal are a result of Naughty Dog dealing with new technologies and new design choices. They're not game-breaking or immersion-breaking. They're simply a product of the time. It's simply a product of it being their first dive into this sort of game. I think the combat is solid, and traversal was the most fun I've had in a game in a long time when this game released. If there's one thing I want you to take away from this video, it's this. What kept Uncharted Drake's Fortune from being drowned in similar underperforming titles was its story. Yes, the gameplay is solid and graphics were pretty great for its time, but what invested audiences here was Nathan. It was Sully, Elena. These characters that we grew to love. It's the idea that this could be anyone's adventure. And that's the idea, right? Uncharted was a game for literally everyone. There's some romance, action, treasure hunting. It was a new way to experience Indiana Jones. At release, it received 8 out of 10s to 9 out of 10s all across the board. IGN awarded it Best Action, PS3's Game of the Year, Best Graphic Technology, and Best Original Score in 2007. Terms such as top-notch and incredible were almost always used when discussing the game. In 2009, Naughty Dog announced that in 2 years' time, Drake's Fortune had sold 2.6 million copies. 1.5 times what Jak and Daxter would sell in the entire PS2 lifetime. And this success paved way for something far greater than Naughty Dog could have ever imagined. Well, that's going to do it for this video today, guys. I really hope you enjoyed. I have loved diving back into Uncharted so very much. If you want to see more of the Uncharted series I'm doing here, this looking back at series, then just make sure to smash like and subscribe and hit that bell button, because I'm coming back to you very soon with Uncharted 2 Among Thieves. So make sure you stick around if you want to see that, guys, and I will see you in the next video.